Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Wow. Thank you so much, all those crazy films. Okay. Okay, so I thank you all very much, and I'm really thank you for inviting me here today. Particular thanks to Dean Campbell for all she's done for the Tisch School. For all of you here today, and for all of us who were lucky enough to have gone here over the years and over the decades, under the guiding hand of Dean Campbell, Tisch has certainly become one of the brightest beacons of NYU, attracting, nurturing, and now graduating some of the most gifted students of this generation. Now, I'm really flattered you asked me to be here today, because even though now I'm not sure I could get into the school any other way. Because I'll go now, we're going to go back into the early 60s. When I started, it was a little bit easier to get into the school. Somehow I had gotten a hold of a syllabus for Washington Square College, and I had been educated in parochial schools and Catholic schools and a small, short stint in a preparatory seminary. So I was sort of off academically. At that time, Washington Square College seemed to be something quite unique because, well, for one reason, well, it was pretty close to where I lived, even though in a deeper sense it was light years way out of my neighborhood. And then, this for me was sort of the best part, it had something called the Department of Motion Pictures, Television, and Radio, MTR department. And it was the M that grabbed me, of course. This is 1959, 1960. I mean, it seemed you could actually major in film, ultimately. It was amazing. It was unbelievable. I mean, well, okay, you still had to, go to college. You had to complete required liberal arts courses, electives, and the only film course you could actually take, this is a way of weeding out the shirkers, the only film course you can actually take in the first year was called History of Cinema. That was it. And I read the syllabus very closely and read it over again, but it was true. I mean, you could actually go to school for film. And I signed up, went to orientation day, and on that first day, there was a man from the MTR department who stood up to talk and explain about what MTR is, et cetera. Talked for maybe 10 minutes, but very, very strongly. His name was Haig Manoogian, and he spoke, I'm telling you, this guy spoke about movies with such excitement and such wild dedication. It was like they were a life force. And this is what I had felt, exactly what I felt about movies myself, but I never really heard anybody else talk about him that way. He seemed to know what they meant to me. And he could have been speaking not just to me, but for me. He was really forceful and charismatic, and it was just like erupting enthusiasm. And if there had ever been any doubt in my mind about signing up, after hearing Haig, it was gone. It was extinguished. This was the place for me. My decision was an easy one to make, certainly, for me at that point. But, honestly, it seemed a little bizarre, a little strange at that time, in those days, maybe even misguided, and certainly very worrying to everybody around me and my family. Look, I didn't realize it then, but in the grand and somewhat aloof academic tradition of great universities at that time, 60 some odd years ago, I understand that film school was considered maybe a sort of ancillary exercise. As a friend of mine put it recently, a sandbox for the visually excitable and academically compromised. I guess it's like you don't take gym because you can't throw a ball. That was me. I had asthma and. Now, my parents have both worked in the garment district for 40 years, and when I said I wanted to do this, they knew there was no turning me back, and they never even tried. They were really nice about it, but they were worried. They were worried, and sometimes I'd hear them late at night because we lived in 2.5 rooms downtown. One night I overheard my mother tell my father, "I think he's crazy." I don't remember what my father said, but I could understand their concern because my mother was right. And when we lived on Elizabeth Street, in a neighborhood that was really, at that time, 1948, 49, all the way up to 1966, I mean, really a small Sicilian village transported to New York. And there were no books in the house. My parents were not educated, really, and they were not in the habit of reading. And there were really no books in the apartments of any of my friends, really. But there were always movies. The theaters were everywhere at that time, and you could see anything, really, all first-run, second-run pictures. But the movies themselves that I found to be a refuge when I went to see these things, they seemed to come from some impossibly distant world. And the place I came from, when you said the word filmmaker, literally, people would say, what are you going to make, celluloid at Eastman Kodak? I said, no, a filmmaker is a guy who makes movies. Oh, movies? You know, there were no feature films coming out of New York. I mean, very few. All very, very small independent pictures. But even after listening to Haig that first day, I really had no real hope of ever getting to make movies myself. All I wanted to do and expected to achieve was to be in an atmosphere where I could share a love for film. But even that, just that seemed a little bit crazy, and it was. So I remember that first day going to school. I was on Elizabeth Street off of Houston, between Prince and Houston, and I walked to Houston Street, made a left, 6 blocks to the west side, and a whole new world opened up to me. And it was Haig Manoogian and this school that showed me that I could be, more than crazy. I registered and I signed up for the elective course offered, besides all the other required courses. The elective course in cinema was the history of cinema, which Haig taught. Now, Haig in those days, he went through everything in those sessions. Those classes met once a week on a Thursday for 3 hours. He went through everything from Edison to Méliès to German Expressionism, Soviet cinema, Citizen Kane, Fellini, La Strada, Nights of Cabiria, all these films. And at the end of the second semester, we all had to do a term paper. And I did a term paper on a film I really liked. I'd just seen The Third Man, Carol Reed, Graham Greene. And this paper was full of enthusiasm and analysis, and I was very proud of it. I got it back; it was a B+. And Haig wrote a comment on it saying, it's very a good job. He said, but remember, The Third Man, it's only a thriller. I'm saying to myself, I thought it was a lot more. And I guess I didn't convince him. This guy has his own way, man. You forget it. But, the thing was, it didn't worry me. I found after being around him for those 2 semesters, it really didn't worry me as much as it might have, because I was already learning through him to hold on to an independence of spirit and a way of working things out for yourself, to please yourself, to shape your own vision that had nothing to do with anyone else's values, even his. He was great. I mean, he loved neorealism, Italian neorealism. So did I. I saw Open City and Paisan when I was 5 years old. But I would mention John Ford and The Searchers, he would get upset. I love both. Anyway. 2 years later, we get into the first film production course, right? And I found out that he was also very strict there, too. He had certain rules. For example, he used to say, look, you bring me a script that has a gun in it, I'm throwing you out of the class. And believe me, I've seen kids thrown out, never to return. I'm not kidding. Some, I don't want to get into it, but it was real. Some people became very big, famous, never mind. Those of you who've seen my movies know that that's a rule I never really obeyed, not even in school. And he tolerated it because I think he encouraged and he valued the individual voice above everything else. He made you think if you had it in you, you could do it. And it was that animating spirit, that original bright creative impulse that he kind of challenged all the time, and he burnished in every one of those 32 students who wound up to be the graduating class. That's right. I understand there's over 1,000 today. So we had 32 at that time. That's how different it was from today's Tisch School of the Arts. Haig, he also gave us a fair warning that it can get a little rough out there, and maybe a little more than rough. I'm not sure I knew how much more then. If I did, who cares? We didn't care, you know, and I don't think you would either. Any of you, whether you're actors, writers, directors, painters, dancers, musicians, all of you in different disciplines, but every one of you are engaged in the same struggle to preserve that initial desire, that animating impulse that brought you here and will carry you along. And it's a very strong thing, that desire, that initial impulse, like an obsession, but it's delicate too, and it needs to be nurtured and protected against the incursions of the world, which can be merciless. Now, I know you heard this a lot, but it will be tough on all levels, professionally and personally, you know? Okay, let me tell you a story. I'm going to tell you a few stories. Let me tell you a story. I'm sitting in a room. I'm waiting. I'm on the first day of a shoot. I'm in this set or an area of what looked like abandoned buildings, and the only thing is I'm waiting there, and I don't have a script. And I'm supposed to do this incredibly complex special effects shot. And it had to be done by, of course, the end of the day. And the hours are going by, and I keep telling my assistant director, but where's the cameraman? I don't even know his name. Where's the actors? I go, he's coming, they're coming, they'll get everything ready. They're working it all out. And I couldn't find anyone. And then there were all these stunt camera guys who were running around with helmets and sort of almost like in parachutes, it seemed to me. I didn't know exactly what was going on. All I know is that in the scene, by the end of the day, I knew that I wasn't going to get any shots. I knew it. And so I knew nothing except everything is riding on what I know, which is nothing. Then I woke up. I mean, or did I? That was 2 days ago, that dream, by the way. I'm not kidding. I got to shoot a picture in 4 weeks. I don't, you know. Hey, since then I had another one, which is even better, I think. I'm about to start, again, first day of shooting. And this time it's a more civilized location, like a hotel suite, very nice. And I have a script. I don't seem very prepared, though. They just gave it to me at the last minute. And my friend, who was the assistant director, you know, he's very nice to me, and the actors are nice to me. And then at one point I noticed that there's no director's chair. And I said to my friend Joe, Joe, you know, the AD, I said, I don't want to be, you know, but I would like to sit down. There's no director's chair. And he said, oh, I'm so sorry. We'll get you one right away. Don't worry about it. But, you know, they never did bring it back. And then on top of that, everybody was walking around me and talking to me very friendly, but they were off on other things. And there was this very distinguished-looking gentleman in the background with little round glasses, very dark glasses. And he was sort of hovering, and he had his eye on everything I was doing. And I asked the AD, I asked my assistant AD, who's that? And he goes, oh, that's Ruben Mamoulian. Mamoulian, I said, the director of Love Me Tonight and Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, the guy who made City Streets, Applause, Queen Christina, Blood and Sand. I mean, the great theater director who did Porgy and Bess in Oklahoma. I mean, he's a great man. What's he doing here? What is he? He goes, oh, he just wants to observe. He's just interested to see how young people work. And so the AD is going about his business, and I'm going about mine. The actors are kind of yesing me like I'm crazy or something. And I'm about to work out the scene. I go off to my right and talk to somebody. And I look back, and there's Mr. Mamoulian talking to the actors and directing the picture. And I said to the AD, what the hell's going on? This is not some guy off the street. This is Ruben Mamoulian. This is not, you know, he's a big deal. And I said, no, he's just helping out, you know. So look, and that was a dream I had actually quite recently, too. So look, the thing is, your position is never secure. Not even when you're sleeping. So what you have to make secure and guard with your life, because it is your life, is the same pure creativity that brought you here and that brought me here too. It's the one thing that's got to carry you through so irresistibly that sometimes it seems like it's barely in your control. And, you know, mostly it shouldn't be. Around the time I managed to make my first couple of features, Roger Ebert liked them. And at one point, I forget some event around, I forget where we were, it was in New York. He was very nice to me over the years. and very supportive. And he said at one point to everybody, in 20 years, you'll be NYU's own Fellini. And I immediately turned and I said, what, it's going to take that long? And I was kind of teasing, but not entirely. Because I had to think about something so grandiose, just maybe was possible against all odds, and a good deal of evidence that was accumulating. I'll tell you 2 stories quickly. You have a few minutes, right? Okay. Ilya Kazan came to NYU to talk to our class. It was 1965. He was directing After the Fall by Arthur Miller, and Lincoln Center hadn't been built yet. They had a tent across the way on Green Street, whatever. Kazan's On the Waterfront was a major, major influence for me and a turning point in my life. Now, we had wonderful documentary filmmakers visiting us and talking, and a lot of incredible experimental filmmakers. But, we didn't have that inroad to Hollywood directors and directors in the narrative studio tradition. And we never certainly had a filmmaker and a director like Kazan. His work is iconic. He was a maker of masterpieces in the American narrative tradition, the studio tradition, which I thought at that time that maybe I could be a part of. And after he left, I was kind of scared, but I worked up the nerve to get his address and set up an appointment. And I got a letter saying, a note saying he was kind enough to meet me for 5 minutes in a week. And so I was really excited, but I still had some trepidation, naturally. And I also must have felt like I was courting disaster because I nearly caused one for myself. I mean, I know this city pretty well, but, I had trouble with his office, where his office was. It was on the top of the old Victoria and Astor Theaters on Broadway, the 2nd floor, 3rd floor. And bottom line is I got lost. I'd worked it out, I'd gotten ready, I was dressed, the whole thing. I got lost, and I finally found him. I was 10 minutes late. And I found him in his office in his trench coat, and he's ready to leave. And we shook hands, and I apologized. And he said, well, how can I help you? He said, well, et cetera, you're such a great influence on me, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You're going to do the arrangement now, and I wondered if I would, be given a job as an on-set assistant. And he goes, we don't do that. I said, all right, listen, I have a script it's about myself and my friends, Lower East Side, and I'm working on it now, it's first feature, and actually it's very much in the vein of what you do, and I would wonder if you could just take a look at it for me and give me your comments. He goes, he said, I'm writing my own script right now, and I don't read other people's work while I'm writing my own script. So, I told him how much I loved his films, especially Waterfront, but particularly America, America, which had just come out. And we shook hands again, and he wished me luck, and that was that. I was so crushed, but I had been so nervous I didn't realize it. And by the time I let it in fully, though, I could see not only how tough the meeting was, but that it had been toughening, too. There's a way that the force of disappointment can be alchemized into something that will, paradoxically, renew you. It's something you're not going to take a seminar in, I'm sorry, You either learn it or you're undone by it. And then at NYU, I became obsessed at NYU reading Moby Dick. I really liked it. And over the years, I read all of Melville's work except Clarel. A little hard. Might get there. One book, Melville's Pierre or the Ambiguities, is one of my favorites. And it's a great book, which incidentally, the author was dealt out a great deal of abuse when it came out. In it, Melville says, quote, "A smile is the chosen vehicle of all ambiguities," unquote. And so I'll give you another example. Back around 67, I had made a couple of short films, and I was hustling, trying to put together some financing for some crazy idea of a small feature we wanted to make. And they arranged for a screening for a wealthy gentleman who, I was told, was so devoted to the art of cinema that he would actually write the occasional check. So we're in this, he went in, looked at the two films, The Big Shave and It's Not Just You, Murray. And he came out, and my producer and I were waiting outside the screening room to meet him, and he came out, the door opens, and this gentleman comes out, maybe in his 50s, bespoke suit, handmade shoes, a top coat with a velvet collar, little round glasses, and a bowler hat. Really, he was smiling. And we said, great. So my producer introduced us. This is the filmmaker. And he said, what'd you think? And the man said, I didn't like it. So my producer kept pushing. He says, well, like The Big Shave, that's won some awards, and people, really respond to it, shown at the New York Film Festival. He goes, one-line joke. So he kept grinning. This man kept grinning. My producer plunged further. He said, what about Murray? It's not just you, Murray. He said it was made at NYU, won a bunch of awards, student film awards all around the world. And at that point, this gentleman leaned closer to me, face to face. He smiled all the time and said, if I saw one thread of talent in there, I would tell you. But I did not. And with that, he walked off. I don't think I'd ever encountered such cruelty, not even from my classmates at the time, And I have to say, not even from my old neighborhood either, where I grew up around some really tough people. But I mean, my producer and I, we were stunned. We looked at each other. He looked at me, I looked at him, and then we just started to laugh. We couldn't help it. We were really laughing. It was a reckless laughter, resilient, crazy. And then, because it was the only direction we let ourselves recognize, we just moved on. We always talked about it fondly. Remember that time? The guy, yeah, we started laughing. Okay, let's move on. I never saw anything. To this day, that face. Anyway. I mean, there was no immediate happy ending. No money was forthcoming. There were certainly ruptures in my confidence, both before and after this. It just was an early sample of the familiar lifelong trajectory. Good reviews, bad reviews. Awards, no rewards. Recognition, none. Box office, really big. My pictures the past 10 years. No box office. And all of it outsized, all of it out of scale, because in this line of endeavor, nothing seems trivial. But what keeps your perspective and protects and enhances that precious creative impulse is, the good stuff every now and then. Some of the work that you do and that you're proud of or you like. And certainly the work of other filmmakers or other artists that deeply inspire you. Look, it's 1960. We started going to NYU, and the 8th Street Playhouse was on 8th Street off 6th Avenue, and it was showing Shadows. And we went to see it, and we come out. You realize, get some coffee, and you realize with this movie, John Cassavetes had changed everything. You didn't need a studio. You didn't need unwieldy equipment that was made for kind of heavy lifting in a factory system. You can even borrow and beg the meager budget money, and you can make a movie. There were no more excuses. Only reasons to go on. You can make a movie. Then, a few years later, 63, I see America, America. And it's as if Elia Kazan had reached deep into a shared past, your past, the American past, to make the first movie epic about the desperation and the dreams of getting to the New World, plotting to get to the New World, cheating to do it, lying and compromising to do it, trading off a part of your soul to get on that boat to get here, to a place where, with luck, with courage, with strength, and a survival instinct that can't be wiped out by anything, you have a chance for, well, maybe not a dream, maybe not even a better life, but a new life. This was a movie, this America, America, about the things and the feelings I heard my family talk about. And you can sense in every frame that Kazan was making a movie about his own family, reliving a history that he was too young to really know. And we lived it with him when we saw this film. It didn't matter that his family came from another part of the Mediterranean. It was as if, without ever knowing us, he overheard us. And it was also about those 6 blocks that I walked in 1960, from one world to another. For Stavros, the character in America, America, for him in the film, it was to get to America. For me, it was to get to America. Here. It's work like that you use to inspire and protect yourself over the years. And you keep going back to steel yourself against all the negative things that get thrown at you to nurture the flame of that first inspiration. It's the work of the old masters, whoever your masters are, really, that reminds you that you have to be singular, inflexible, unyielding in your own work so that even the struggle, that very struggle to achieve, becomes its own reward. The hard, simple ability to continue is a kind of blessing. The world may think of it as an obsession. Your parents may think of it, sorry, parents, but something like mine did, that's something crazy. but you can't do your work according to other people's values. I'm not talking about also following your dream either. I never liked the inspirational value of that phrase. Besides being sentimental, it's beside the point. Dreaming is a way of trivializing the process, the obsession that carries you through the failure as well as the successes, which could be harder to get through. I mean, if you're dreaming, you're sleeping, and it's important and imperative to always be awake to your feelings, your possibilities, your ambitions, and don't get hung up on the consequences, because they can be good, like awards, success, and even celebrity, and they can be bad, like no awards, no success, and no celebrity. It's a tricky balance. And for myself, I've fallen off the high wire a number of times. The seductions of the rewards are as risky as the temptations of anger and self-doubt. And you're especially vulnerable when, let's say, as an actor, you've lost a part, or as a painter, you haven't sold a single painting from your first show, or as a filmmaker, where a major section of the audience at one of your previews of one of your features walks out after 4 minutes. Like the Exodus from Egypt. And it's happened a number of times to me. No one takes more knocks than a politician. Maybe no one deserves them more too. But this is something I found from, said to me by a friend, that Theodore Roosevelt said in 1910 in another springtime at another university. Quote, "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat." Unquote. There. That's, I didn't write that. That was Theodore Roosevelt. I mean, I don't think there are any cold and timid souls out there. You wouldn't have come this far without, if you had been, you wouldn't be sitting here today. I mean, look, you may be shy, you may be tentative, and even at times you may be fragile, but you have to protect your own voice, your creative spirit, no matter what it costs. That takes tenacity, confidence, and resilience. And it's always a good idea to keep all the great work of the past close to your heart. In the darkest times that I've had, there's always the inspiration of the brilliant work that went before me. And I've been lucky enough over the years to actually have met some of the artists who created and shaped that spirit of cinema, and their unselfish creative generosity enriched me. King Vidor, Sam Fuller, Vincent Minnelli, Billy Wilder, the great Italian directors Fellini, Antonioni, Francesco Rossi, Emmerich Pressburger, Michael Powell. Michael Powell most especially, and most of all. I was lucky with John Cassavetes because he became a real friend and a real mentor and guided me. And Kazan, years after that crushing first meeting, I got a note from Elia Kazan addressed to me this way, quote, "From one old world man to another," unquote. He became kind of a close and a revered friend, kind of a spiritual father after my own father died in the early 90s. He was warm, wary, challenging, puzzling, supportive, argumentative, defiant, and always ready with what he called his Anatolian smile. Because I know that smile. That's Pierre's smile, the one that hides all ambiguities. It's defensive and calculating and disarming. It's a way of protecting the spirit of that first initial impulse from which you draw strength for all of your creative life. Pretty much my smile, too. But I admit it's not always guarded. Even now with, so much behind me and, shall we say, somewhat less ahead, I still cherish the influence in my own work of all those guiding spirits of filmmakers who had such an important impact on my life. It's their influence that keeps on challenging me and encouraging me. I mean, bottom line, the heart of the matter is this, that when I'm working on a picture, especially in the editing room, and now I moved the editing into my house at the grace of my extraordinary wife, Helen, and my young daughter, Francesca, who would put up with this. We were editing in the house, myself and Thelma Schoonmaker. And I still, even though weak and tired and shooting 85 days, 100 days, problems, I still find that trying to weave together a visual narrative and cutting together two pieces of film, two different images, when they come together in a way that's unique and that's different, something you hadn't expected, that's surprising and revelatory, it's still exhilarating to me. It's still satisfying. It's still fulfilling. It's still worth it. I mean, I keep trying to go beyond that and really push the limits of visual storytelling, but I find that they are my limits, not the limits of the medium. That's for you to do. Because with everything added up, the frequent blows weighed against these sporadic triumphs, this is, I have to say, not just a vocation. It's a great gift. But you also know this, for your work, for your passion, every day is a rededication. Painters, dancers, actors, writers, filmmakers. It's the same for all of you, all of us. Every step is a first step. Every brushstroke is a test. Every scene is a lesson. Every shot is a school. So let the learning continue. Best.